Hello all, I'm Wadabra. Welcome back to Adastra. In the last episode, our boys got found out. Cato entered their room, waking them with a scream, then brought the palace doctor in to confirm the rumor that Marco is an unprofiled alien. The poor doctor is then sent to the dungeons for his crime of knowing too much. Now, having confirmed Marco's status as unprofiled, Cato accuses Amicus of initiating first contact, quickly followed by the accusation that he and Marco are lovers. When Amicus denied the first and said nothing to the second, Cato commanded the drones to kill Marco, which forced Amicus to intervene. Amicus is wrestled to the ground by Cato, and Marco is taken hostage by Cassius to keep Amicus compliant while they stage the third trial. Cato beat the shit out of Amicus to make the victory look convincing, and Cassius is instructed to stand over his brother in false victory. Marco, though, is bright enough to realize that he's definitely going to die as soon as he's of no use to them, so he took matters into his own hands. He stole the Nervo from Cassius's discarded robes and used it against its former owner before Cato tackled him. The Nervo was not actually set to lethal, though, as Cato had instructed, so Cassius does survive. Cato proceeds to turn the Nervo on Marco, but before he can act, Amicus approaches from behind and rips the metal grating from Cato's face. With Cato distracted, Amicus tells Marco to run to Neferu's room, where Marco learns of his newly appointed Chemian citizenship and how it's going to keep him safe. This, if anyone has forgotten, is the result of the sexual exchange between Amicus and Neferu back in episode 12. After subduing Amicus and sending him to the dungeons, Cato and Cassius wait to be taken to the hospital, promising Marco and Neferu that there will be further discussions once he's returned to the palace. Shortly thereafter, Virginia shows up to Neferu's room, and together they discuss the possibility of getting a hold of the footage from the staged third trial, before eventually leaving Marco alone in the room. That's the recap. Remember to like and share this video to help me appease the almighty YouTube algorithm, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode. And as always, content warnings can be found in the description below. Let's get started. The idea of me staying in Neferu's room constantly for the foreseeable future doesn't last long. In fact, a few hours later, I find myself leaving his quarters and wandering the halls of the palace like I have so many times before. Cato and Cassius probably won't be back for a little while, so I don't really have anything to be worried about as far as I know. Just as I'm thinking this, I see something out of the corner of my eye. A gray tail, green stripes. Alexios. Seeing the cat suddenly reminds me of all those suspicions I've been keeping bottled up about him, if only to keep the peace in the palace. Again, with all that thrown out the window, I find myself fast walking in Alex's direction, determined to confront him. While I feel like complete shit after what's happened, I also feel completely liberated. Cat's out of the bag. I can basically say whatever I want now. Well, mostly. Definitely should still be careful. I turn the corner as I'm thinking this, and find myself standing just a dozen feet away from the cat, Alex bent over as he waters one of the plants. He's humming again, and he's smiling when he looks up at me. That smile immediately vanishes. He drops his watering can, sending it and the contents spilling across the floor with a clanging noise. He basically lost all chance of looking non-suspicious in the first second he saw me.
Marco, how are you this fine morning?
Terrible. What are you doing?
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Are you feeling ill? What happened to your arm?
Alex's eyes go to the bandage on my bicep, but I ignore him, taking a step forward. In response, he takes one back.
What have you been up to? Up to?
His eyes dart left and right, as if looking for an escape. Telling Neferu about me? Telling the triumvirates about what I told you? I don't know if he actually did that last one, but his reaction seems to tell me. His eyes widen as he backs away.
I have no idea.
Did you talk to Cato yesterday? After you saw me in the gardens last night? You realize what's happening right now, right?
Marco, you're scaring me.
The cat continues to back away. I follow, and that's when Alex just gives up on his act, turns tail, and sprints down the hall. Before I know it, I'm running after him, eyes focused on his thrashing tail as his sandals slap against the marbled floor.
Stop chasing me! I don't know what you want.
I don't bother responding as I reach out to grab the back of his robes. Just as I make contact, though, he comes to a sudden halt, pressing himself against the wall so that I stumble and slide past him. He's at a door, and he presses his paw to the black panel so that it slides open before he dashes inside. I don't think he was really thinking about where he was going to end up, because I know that's the bathing room, and I know he's trapped. I turn around and run inside after him, just in time to see him, still sprinting, slide dramatically on the wet floor, flying through the air for a moment before landing painfully on the corner of the bath. I hear him wheeze before he plunges into the hot water. If he lost his breath, it's back as he comes back up with a gasp, letting that all out in a scream of pain.
Ah! Hot!
The cat scrambles out of the water clumsily, scrabbling at the sides with his claws before finally rolling out, looking small and disheveled with his fur all matted up against his skin. He curls up and, to my surprise, I see that he's crying. This sight alone is enough to give me some doubts that Alex is the conniving saboteur I think him to be. He looks so pathetic right now. I stand over him for a bit, looking down at his pitiful form before clearing my throat. You okay?
Okay? I think you broke my ribs.
Me? You're the one that ran away for no reason.
No reason? You advanced upon me in a threatening manner.
The cat curls up again and makes some more sobbing noises, and I'm between believing him and believing that he's flat out faking. Sit on the bench. I reach down a hand to help him up, but he swats it away. I narrow my eyes. Answer my questions, Alex. The cat finally sits up, sniffling and rubbing at his nose while the other paw clutches at his side.
I have no answers. I'm simply a pet.
Painfully, Alex gets to his feet before setting himself gingerly on the bench while stripping off his wet robe. Yeah, and I was simply a pet just yesterday. I'm not as stupid as you think, Alexios. Alex looks up at me, that pathetic, sad look replaced by one that I can't really explain. When he remains quiet, I try again. I know everyone has interests here. What are yours? Maybe we have the same ones.
You're not being very subtle, are you?
What you did yesterday wasn't subtle at all. Who else would have told Cato that I was conscious again, and that me and Amicus are lovers? Alex frowns, then shrugs.
How am I supposed to know? I told Cassius last night. He could have told a number of people, especially Cato.
That makes me pause. Of course Alex talks to Cassius on a regular basis. Probably every night. It would make much more sense that the wolf was the one to tell Cato, rather than Alexios. But what about the lovers thing? You were the only one that suspected. Well, him and Neferu, but I know Neferu wouldn't tell. Alex scoffs, having taken off his robe and in the process of examining his side. It looks fine to me, no blood or anything, but he winces as he prods at it.
You think it wasn't obvious? It was a prominent rumor ever since the first trial.
That, and I guess Cato did walk in on us in bed together. I feel my resolve failing a bit, but then I remember Neferu again. But Neferu told me that you confessed my intelligence to him. Why would you do that? This time, the cat's reaction is rather different, his ears blushing as he looks away.
He was curious about you, and he can be persuasive. I'm sorry I told him, but again, I thought it was obvious. And I didn't think he'd tell you.
Alex scowls, massaging his ribs. I glance at the cat, wondering if I'd just made a huge mistake. But what about the triumvirates? I told you first, and then they all suddenly found out somehow. Alex quirks his head.
Well, Cassius was discussing it with someone else, wasn't he? Maybe it was that person.
Neferu had said that they hadn't interfered at all in the trials, and Virginia didn't show any indication that she might have sabotaged her own brother. But then again, I have the feeling that she's probably a lot better at acting than anyone else here. I know I can't really trust anyone now, except Amicus, and maybe Neferu. I'd been so confident just moments ago, and now I find myself feeling guilty as I watch the sopping wet cat clutch himself, hunched over. I don't trust him to be telling me the truth, not at all, but I also don't trust myself in being so confident that he's lying. So, shamefully, I reach out a hand, resting it on his shoulder. He flinches, then glares up at me. Sorry. I just thought. I'm just trying to figure out what's happening. Alex carefully moves my hand off his shoulder, but he doesn't seem all that angry.
That's fine. Just don't do it in such a brutish manner next time. You frightened me.
Yeah. And sorry about your ribs, too. Even if you did do it to yourself. Alex probably hears the smile creeping into my voice at the end of the sentence, because he glares at me again.
That really hurt, you know? And now I have to go to the city to see a physician. I'll have to take that awful, bumpy carriage too, since Cassius forbids me from flying.
I rub my arm awkwardly. Why's that?
Ever since his father's ship crashed and the investigation was botched, he's petrified of it.
Botched?
Yes, so they don't know how it crashed. Odd thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Just when I was having my doubts, I get another flare of suspicion as to why he's telling me something like this, but I brush it aside for now. So you know about everything that's happened?
Vaguely, though I'd rather not be involved. Anyway, I suppose it's not so inconvenient for me that I go. I was meaning to visit Cassius in hospital today anyway.
The cat stands up, bending down with a grimace to pick up his robes.
And I am sorry about what happened to your wolf. I hope you're able to figure it out.
And with that, the cat walks out of the bathing room, his tail dragging limply behind him. I want to say more to him, to figure out exactly what he's up to. I might have been wrong about him, but I also don't feel satisfied with his explanations. I can tell now that we're not exactly friends anymore, even before I caused him to shatter his ribs and boil in the hot tub. I sit on the bench for a while, thinking about soaking in the bath. I realized then that the last time I did that was with Amicus, and doing so now, alone, would be way too depressing. I get up and leave, hoping that Virginia took my request seriously. Imagining the wolf below me, alone, is too much to think about. So I head back into the halls, deciding to just go back to Neferu's room and stay there like I'd been told to. A few days pass like this. There's a bizarre calm in the air. The palace is quiet, despite the absolute chaos that the top echelon of the empire is in right now. In the meantime, Cassius becomes emperor with surprisingly little fanfare. I watch it on the screens, the young white wolf's right leg and left arm in casts, which is explained several times to have happened in the third trial, as he's coronated by Cato, who's now missing his visor. That isn't explained to the viewers at all. I don't feel much as this happens. Realizing how fake all of this is, how it doesn't seem to mean anything, despite how much I'm told it means. It's all theatrics. What matters most now is taking the two of them down and getting Amicus up and out of that dungeon. Even now, I'm not really thinking about getting home, despite the fact that the stretch drive should be returning at any moment now, if it hasn't already. There are bigger things at stake here, the main one being my best friend's life. And that's why on the third day after the fake trial, I find myself eagerly involving myself in a discussion with Neferu as he tells me about his plans. Cato is due back in the palace that day, and we both suspect he'll be making a trip to our room.
So, the most important thing to the wolves is drama. A scene. Something memorable. That's all they seem to care about around here.
Neferu sniffs dismissively as he sips at his wine, and I find myself starting to see why Amicus might find him so irritating. Not that he's wrong, though, and I usually find myself agreeing with him. So, make a scene that makes Cato and Cassius look bad?
Well, most importantly, we need to find, or even make up information about them that will irreparably damage their reputation in the public sphere.
Like what Cassius did to Amicus during the second trial? Neferu smirks.
Even worse than that, Marco. Preferably something that shows disloyalty, or insults the pride of the wolves in general. That is something they often can't look past.
Didn't Amicus having sex with you show disloyalty? Or hurt their pride? Neferu waves his paw dismissively in the air.
No, it's been established amongst the public that he was simply furthering his goal of an alliance with my species, which was completely in line with his character. As for pride, well, he wasn't the one raising his tail.
I sigh. So we need something about Cassius and Cato that's out of their character?
Yes, something that shows them to be not who they say they are. The public must distrust them.
Neferu strokes his chin.
Would be convenient to have all that footage that Virginia was talking about, but considering how secure it might be, that could be impossible.
Worth trying to get, though.
Yes, I'll have to discuss that further with Virginia.
So, what should I be doing? Neferu pauses, then smiles at me.
Marco, my duty is to not put you in danger, as I've said. I won't have you—
Well, I don't care. I need to help. I'll do whatever I have to do. Neferu raises an eyebrow at me.
Oh yes? Even if it might risk your own life? Cato is only barely tolerating the protective line that being a Chemian citizen affords you. I would not push him further.
Then I'll do things behind the scenes. I don't care. I just want to do something. Neferu sighs deeply.
We'll see. Just keep in mind that the most important thing to Amicus is that you stay alive. That's what you can do that will help him the most.
I take that in, still not fully convinced that there's nothing I can do.
But I'll certainly let you know if I believe there's a way for you to help. As for me, my status leaves me untouchable. Unless Cato wants to risk another war, which I guarantee you he does not.
I'd imagine he has first-hand experience.
Indeed.
Neferu, Cato wishes to enter your quarters.
I jump, wondering if the walls are thin enough for the old wolf to have heard us. Neferu doesn't seem surprised, though.
As we expected. Come, please tell him to hold for a moment. I'm in the nude.
Yes, Neferu.
Neferu looks at me.
I suppose our mission starts now. I'll have my own drone recording in the corner there, hopefully to catch the old man saying something incriminating. What I'd like you to do is to crouch behind those bushes. Keep hidden and quiet.
What? I thought I was supposed to be involved.
You will be, but I'd rather he not filter himself because of you.
I hesitate for a second, then quickly do as I'm told, even though I do feel bitter at the feeling of being tossed aside once again. Neferu, I will override the security again if you do not. Cato's voice crackles over the speakers, but that's when the jackal opens the door, and for a moment his voice comes from two places at once. I'm pretty well hidden behind a few trees and bushes, my surroundings dark enough that I'm pretty sure Cato wouldn't be able to see me through the leaves and twigs I'm peering through. The two males stand awkwardly across from each other before Cato suddenly strides in, forcing the jackal to step aside, though Neferu keeps that smug smile on his face.
What a pleasure it is for you to visit me today.
As Cato walks in, I get a look at his face for the first time. I'd seen that he lacked his visor in the broadcast, but seeing it up close. The stern look I'd always imagined under his now broken machinery is definitely there. His eyes have a milky, gray quality to them, heavily scarred. The old wolf stops just in front of the fountain, his ears perked up high. I wonder if he can see anything at all, and Neferu asks just that.
How is your sight, your former highness?
I see one of those ears twitch before the wolf slowly turns around. Non-existent, young prince.
Oh, please, just call me
Where is the alien? Neferu pauses.
Alex? Or do you mean…
You know damn well who I'm referring to, jackal. Neferu raises his paws defensively, even though Cato can't see.
Apologies, Cato. Marco told me he would be in the gardens doing landscaping work.
Cato snorts. I didn't hear him out there.
It is a rather large garden. A very beautiful one as well.
Cato doesn't respond, instead staring about the room.
Would you like some wine?
Neferu gestures at the bedside table, picking up his own goblet to take a sip, loudly. I see Cato's ears twitch again before he turns to the jackal. What is your plan with the alien? Neferu frowns.
Plan?
Do not ever play games with me. That will be my only warning to you, jackal. Cato's voice is so cold and ominous that even Neferu's grin wavers. But he recovers quickly, taking another loud slurp of wine.
Such good wine. One of the few superior products your people produce. Now, as for Marco, I'm simply fulfilling a promise to Amicus.
I see. That wasn't so hard to tell me then, was it? Speaking of, quite astonishing that he was so easily beaten by Cassius, of all people. Quite. I wonder how he was able to accomplish such a feat. It was broadcast. You would have been able to see it. Ah, well, I don't watch Adastra in broadcasts. Too much melodrama and propaganda for my tastes. Pugnu is a combination of skill and luck, and it's not always the strongest that wins. Of course! Though I have to wonder, might any of that luck have been, well, manufactured? Cato is silent for a moment. Cato being silent is when you know that something is very wrong. Are you implying something, Jackal? Oh, no. I'm simply curious. I came to study the politics and workings of the Empire, while also trying to improve relations between our species. I feel knowing all the facets of woven politics is important. Cato sneers. There is a fine line between studying and spying here. Neferu chuckles. Well, what I do know is that you wolves often go about things in a theatrical fashion, and it's sometimes hard to tell what's real or not. I assumed the fight to be, well, somewhat staged. Cato chuckles, and immediately I know that Neferu is making a lot of mistakes here. I'm not sure what his plan is. Maybe he'd thought that Cato would be more friendly with him, or that he could lull the old wolf into a false sense of security somehow. Maybe he's just trying to feel the old man out. I also get the feeling that maybe he shouldn't have had all that wine before doing this. His suave, carefree attitude works on most, either to charm or to annoy, but Cato is not someone I feel it will work particularly well on. Either way, it's clear Cato knows exactly what's happening. I know Chemians pride themselves on their own intelligence, but I have to wonder why, considering your extreme stupidity. Oh? Neferu casually sloshes his wine about in its goblet. Your arrogance amazes me, young one. I know you were fortunate enough to have been birthed after the war, but it's as if you were never taught the history between our peoples. I've spent countless hours studying this history, Cato, and that's mostly why I'm here. Mostly. It seems the rest of that reason is to fuck with the delicate balance our empire is currently in. Certainly not. I am merely an observer. I want to tell Neferu to shut up, to just tell Cato to go look for me out in the gardens or something. I can see the hackles on Cato's shoulders rising, and I can only hope that the jackal was right about being untouchable. I know I offered you to stay in this palace as long as you pleased, and I never withdraw an offer without good reason. But have you thought of moving out to the city? There are many more accommodations out there. Oh, no thank you. I much prefer it here. Everyone is so interesting. It is just like a Chemian to take full advantage of a wolf's tolerance. Neferu quirks an eyebrow. Tolerance? Not a word I often associate with a wolf. Our tolerance for your arrogance was unprecedented. Neferu seems confused for a moment. Oh? Are you referring to the war? I'm sorry. We're quite a bit more blunt where I'm from, so I did not realize what you were getting at. Neferu smirks. For a moment, I thought you were coming on to me, much like Amicus did. Definitely too much to drink. Or this jackal is a lot crazier than I thought he was.
You wolves tend to be aggressive like the...
Cato becomes a blur, closing the 5-foot distance between the two of them in less than a second. The next thing I know, Cato has the jackal up against one of the pillars, slamming Neferu so hard against it that I see the plaster crack and fall away. Neferu gasps loudly, kicking out at Cato a few times as he struggles with the old wolf's thick arms.
Get off!
Neferu kicks out again, this time at Cato's groin. If the old wolf felt anything, he doesn't show it, instead holding Neferu tightly in place while he snarls in his face.
Speaking of tolerance, I have tolerated your arrogance for far too long. Just because you are the Pharaoh's son. The second son, and of a ruler who has so little power over his kingdom in the first place. I shouldn't be surprised.
Cato pulls Neferu forward, then slams him back against the pillar again, causing more plaster to fall and the jackal's teeth to clack together, loud enough that I can hear it.
You're all the fucking same, every single one of you. But somehow, you're the worst I've yet to meet.
Again, Cato slams Neferu against the pillar, and I start to stand up, wishing I had a Nervo.
Is this the next generation of Kimian we must deal with? I know you weren't alive for the war, but it seems another one is inevitable if you're an example of what's to come.
Neferu tries to speak, but lets out a choked cough. Cato loosens his grasp, and Neferu gasps a few times.
No. Amicus was a bit less rough, but if you wanted to put your paws on me, you only had to...
This time, Cato almost lifts the jackal off his feet, cutting Neferu off with a horrific gag, like he's throwing up.
I must say, you have a funny way of going about building an alliance. It's as if you thought tail-raising would get you whatever you wanted.
Now Neferu really starts to struggle, kicking around aimlessly, throwing his head left and right, sending drool flinging from his muzzle. Cato doesn't relent, and I know this is my cue to do something.
It's been a while since I've killed a jackal. My paws have been itching to do it again. Maybe you'll be my next?
I don't know what to do exactly. I have no weapon, but I wonder if maybe I can at least distract the wolf long enough for Neferu to get away, to breathe again. So I run out of my hiding spot, rustling the branches and leaves as I do. Cato is so focused on what he's doing to Neferu that he doesn't seem to even hear me. As I run at him, I can see the wolf grinning maniacally into Neferu's face, like this really is something he's been wanting to do for a very long time. He finally seems to hear me at the last second, turning his head in my direction before I lower my shoulder and try to tackle him off of Neferu. It's like hitting a brick wall covered in fur. I make contact with the old man's side, and for a moment I get a whiff of musk and perfume before I'm sent right back down on my ass. I wonder for a moment if I've dislocated my shoulder, looking up in a daze at what result my attack might have had, if any. To my relief, I see Neferu on his paws and knees, gagging and coughing, drool stringing from his muzzle. Cato is standing slightly to the side, looking in my direction, over my head, but he clearly knows where I am. He only focuses on me for a moment, though, then he turns his head in the direction of the coughing jackal, Neferu crawling away at this point. Cato makes his way towards him before drawing back a foot. I can only reach out, not even having enough time to ask Cato to stop, before the wolf kicks the jackal between the legs. He does it so hard that I see Neferu's knees skip off the ground for a moment before he pitches face first into the marble, on his knees and clutching at himself as he lets out a howl of agony. I cringe, immediately thinking of the time I kicked Amicus, and how much harder Cato must have kicked Neferu. I start to move towards them again, in case Cato thinks of doing anything else, but the old wolf simply stands there, breathing heavily, head tilted down as he listens to Neferu moan.
For the kicks you gave me earlier, that should put your whoring out of commission for a few days, no?
Neferu is curled up on his knees at this point, paws tucked into himself. It's at this point that I see a gush of red liquid overflow from his muzzle, and for one horrific moment, I wonder if somehow Cato had kicked him so hard that he'd ruptured his organs, or something. But no, it's the wine, and it spills across the marble. Cato wrinkles his nose at the retching sound before carefully stepping around the jackal.
As I said, I won't withdraw my offer for you to stay, but there are many apartments open in the city. Just know that you will not be able to take your new citizen with you. Otherwise, I'd like to try this discussion again in the future, if you're willing to be more cooperative.
With that, the old wolf stalks out of the bedroom. At the same time, 2 white drones float in, hovering over Neferu. One lowers itself to the ground to begin cleaning up the mess, while the other holds out what looks like a couple capsules on a plate, which it balances on a metal appendage.
Neferu, you seem to have vomited. Would you like anti-nausea medication?
I stumble over to the jackal to kneel at his side and try to help in any way that I can. He simply keeps his eyes screwed shut, holding up a paw before returning it to his sore spot. Awkwardly, I rub at his shoulder, trying to ignore the smell as the drone does its work of cleaning up the puke. A few minutes later, I manage to help the jackal to the bed, his breath ragged the entire way. It's strange seeing him like this. Usually he's so confident and in control. I never expected anyone to do anything like this to him. But I guess if someone was going to do it, it was Cato. Are you sure you're okay? I ask for what's probably the 3rd time as I sit next to him, and Neferu manages a smile despite the clear pain he's in.
No. But I'll have to go to the physician to be sure. All the way in the city since Cato saw fit to imprison the palace doctor.
Do you need, ice or something? I don't know, he hit you so fucking hard.
I'll manage. I just miscalculated. I'll know how to handle him in the future.
I frown, not really feeling like that's the case. As I'm trying to help him, though, Com's voice comes over the intercom again.
Virginia requests access to your room, Neferu.
Neferu suddenly straightens up, moving his paws from his crotch to his thighs.
Granted.
She nods at the 2 of us before wrinkling her nose.
Ugh, it smells like rancid wine in here.
Indeed. What did you need, Virginia?
To my surprise, Virginia turns to me. Instead of the hostile expression she'd been wearing the last time we'd encountered each other, it's much kinder, much to my relief.
Marco, I had a discussion with Cassius about seeing Amicus. He seems accepting of the idea, under one condition.
There's a pause. What?
Well, he wishes to speak with you in private.
Private?
That is not wise, Marco. We should negotiate with him to allow me to be there.
Virginia laughs.
You really think Cassius would allow a Chemian in on a private conversation?
Virginia pauses, eyeing the jackal, Neferu currently still hunched up, despite his attempts to keep straight.
What happened to you?
Nothing of note. I raise an eyebrow, which Virginia sees.
Marco, what happened?
Well, I pause, watching as Neferu raises his own eyebrow, but makes no attempt to stop me. Well, Neferu pissed off Cato, and Cato hurt him.
What?
I was attempting to pry information from the old man about the staged trial. I was unsuccessful.
Why did you even think you could be successful? Cato knows exactly what we're up to, no doubt. This is so unlike you. It jeopardizes everything, Neferu.
Virginia seems completely bewildered, and now that I think about it, I have to agree. What was Neferu thinking? But then, Virginia narrows her eyes as she sees the jackal grinning, now openly covering his crotch.
What?
Well, I may not have achieved exactly what I wanted, but I attained something just as valuable. Neferu glances at the corner of the room, where his drone is. You recorded it all? Yes, and an attack on the Pharaoh's son will not look very nice on the Chemian news channels, will it?
Neferu.
A dark tone enters the wolf's voice.
That risks war.
The jackal rolls his eyes, adjusting himself rather lewdly. I would never actually send it, but Cato doesn't know that. It's simply convenient blackmail material if things don't go as planned. Virginia squeezes the bridge of her snout, closing her eyes.
You don't know Cato very well, do you? And neither do I. Sometimes I believe he wants another war. Did he hit you?
Virginia's eyes drift lower. Yes. Anyway, he's no longer the emperor. It's Cassius I'd use it against.
You know Cato is his advisor.
But still not the emperor. I would hope your brother has large enough stones. Again, the jackal adjusts himself. To do his job and not listen to a warmongering advisor.
One would hope.
Virginia continues to look unconvinced. I shift around impatiently next to Neferu. So, did he want to see me now? Virginia turns to me, again looking as if she had forgotten that I was there.
That seemed to be the case.
Neferu sighs loudly. At least try to convince him to allow you to be present, Virginia. I don't want Marco to be left alone with him.
There's little to worry about. Cass is not Cato. But I can try.
Virginia looks to me.
Ready, Marco?
I quickly get up, following the wolf to the door. I look back at Neferu, the jackal looking uncharacteristically disheveled as he still hunched up around his junk. He gives me a meaningful look, probably meant to tell me to be careful, so I give him a quick nod before following the wolf out the door. We walk in silence, the only sound being the birds and the swishing of our robes as we make our way through the halls. I'm not sure exactly where we're going, but after a while, I realize it must be the throne room. I stare at the back of the she-wolf's head, contemplating a few things. Virginia is the person I know the least about in this palace, which probably means she's doing the best job at playing this little game. I want to ask her a lot of things, but I'm worried about overstepping boundaries, something that seems rather easy to do with her. As we get closer to the door, I can't help myself from asking at least one question. So do you care that Amicus is in the dungeons? Like, you want him to get out, not just because you want to be his advisor, right? Immediately, I see the wolf's ears flick back in. Hopefully mild annoyance and not extreme anger.
First of all, it's not any of your business what my motivations are, Marco.
Virginia doesn't follow that up immediately, so we're left in an awkward silence as we walk the last 10 feet to the throne room door. She pauses there and finally looks at me, her eyes narrowed.
But Amicus is my brother, and for that alone, I love him. And though he's a complete dullard, he's one of the few to be genuinely kind to me in this palace. He is a good wolf.
Virginia turns away, raising a paw to hover over the black panel.
But you would already know that.
With that, she presses the panel and the door slides open. I immediately spot Cassius at the other end of the cavernous room, looking a bit small and insignificant on the extravagant throne. Probably not the best impression for the Emperor of Adastra to make. As I'm thinking this, we begin to make our way toward him. A drone hovers in front of the white wolf, holding up a screen under his face. He's not looking at it, though, instead narrowing his eyes at the two of us as Virginia escorts me to the base of the steps.
Here he is, brother.
Cassius shifts around in his seat, and for a moment, I think I catch sight of some sort of booster seat under his rear.
Thank you, Virginia. You can leave us be now.
Virginia hesitates, clasping her paws together in front of herself.
Brother, I would feel more comfortable if I was allowed to stay. I'd rather not leave you alone with an unprofiled alien.
Cassius snorts, waving his paw dismissively.
I've interacted with it many times before. I will be fine. If not, then the drones will take care of him.
Cassius makes eye contact with me as he says that last part, clearly meaning for me to take it as a warning or a threat. Virginia hesitates again, and Cassius's eyes drift toward her in question. That's when the she-wolf bows deeply before turning away. As she passes me, she gives me her own look, not unlike Neferu's. Be careful. I continue to face Cassius as I listen to Virginia's soft footsteps recede behind me. Then I hear the door open and close. I keep my eyes low on Cassius's feet, although I can tell he's looking directly at me. The silence drags on. I wonder if the white wolf is using Cato's technique of using silence to intimidate. Finally, though, he clears his throat loudly, almost making me jump.
First, I want to say that you may speak freely here. I only want the truth.
I look up at him then, and see that he's not looking at me anymore. Instead, it's to the side, as if he's lost in thought.
I'm confused as to how all of this could have happened. So, know that if you speak the truth, you will be free from any consequences.
Consequences? He's making it sound as if I've committed some sort of crime or conspiracy. I mean, maybe I'd been part of some, but it's definitely not my fault. What do you want to know? Cassius's eyes flick to mine then, and I see mild surprise there. He's still probably not used to an alien like me speaking directly to him in full sentences. He pauses again before resting his chin on a paw, clearly trying to look casual.
Who exactly are you?
I raise an eyebrow. Marco, you already know this.
I know your name, but I want to know more beyond that. What is it that you're doing here? How did my brother find you?
Immediately, our conversation reaches a point where I find myself unsure of what to say. How much can I say to him? Obviously, I can't trust him at all. I know that. But I also know that he's in complete control over what happens to Amicus, and there may be a few things I have to give up to keep my wolf safe. So I square my shoulders and look Cassius in the eye. I want to know that Amicus is okay first, and I want to see him. Immediately, Cassius's demeanor changes from sour suspicion to sour fury.
Excuse me? You aren't the one to make demands here. I am the Emperor, and you will answer my questions.
I get the vague sensation of my balls drawing up into my stomach as I realize how dangerous all of this is. My thoughts go to that physician, Felix, being sent to the dungeons without a second thought. But I know I have protections, and I have to trust them now if I'm going to make any sort of deal with Cassius. Yeah, but you're not my emperor. I answer to the pharaoh. I'm spitballing, but it seems to be working as it gives Cassius pause. After a moment, it seems like he's able to collect himself.
So I've heard. But remind yourself that you are on Adastra. Therefore, you are to abide by our laws and customs. And lying to the Emperor is punishable by death.
And again, that feeling in my stomach. But I have to remind myself, rules don't matter here. It's all about playing their game. I know that Cassius would never have me executed or imprisoned while Neferu is here. That would be far too risky for the Empire as a whole. I can't be intimidated by empty threats, even if they threaten my life. If I want to help Amicus, I have to push the limits. At least within reason. I also remind myself that I'm not completely untouchable, as Neferu can attest to. I just want to see my former master. If you can guarantee me that, then I'll tell you what happened. Another long pause as Cassius just glares at me. Then he lets out a little huff.
Fine.
It's almost funny how he's still acting like a child, despite now being the Emperor of Adastra. So I take a deep breath. I consider lying, of course, but what Amicus did was an honest mistake. At least, in my opinion. So I start at the beginning, how Amicus came upon the records of my people in the archives, how he rushed to my planet to find a willing pet, how everything suddenly went south when he found out far too late that we were not part of the Glaxius, and finally, how he tried to keep it all a secret to keep the Empire safe. I emphasize the keeping the Empire safe part, even if it wasn't originally at the top of my priorities. I'm telling the truth, even if I'm stretching it a bit. Cassius listens to all of this with various reactions: contempt, surprise, anger, then contemplation. I'm struck by the contrast between him and Cato. While Cato keeps his emotions in check, aside from the occasional explosion of rage, Cassius wears it all on his sleeve. Not that different from Amicus in that way, even if his personality is. When Cassius still doesn't say anything, I sigh. It was an honest mistake. You've got to understand that.
I already know that it was a mistake. Even Amicus would not make first contact on purpose. I had just wondered what sort of stupidity caused it.
He had no reason to think we were uncontacted. We were recorded in the library, or whatever. Cassius suddenly shifts on his throne.
What are you? Species and planet name.
Now I'm left to stand in silence. No fucking way am I telling this wolf brat where I'm from. Cassius must see this on my face immediately, because his fur once again puffs out in anger.
Do you want to see Amicus or not? I need to know this to verify that what you're saying is truthful.
Is that really why? I know what you wolves do to other aliens. Why would I give away my people like that? Cassius puffs himself up even bigger, and I wonder if he's going to start screaming at me. Then he suddenly deflates.
The problem here is first contact, yes? So why would I go out to find and do whatever you think it is I'll do to your people? I have no interest in furthering the problem. I simply want to know.
But why do you care? Cassius snaps his eyes back up to mine.
Believe it or not, Marco, I am trying to help Amicus. Do you not know the consequences of such a crime? He could be executed for this.
Now my heart does a backflip. What? Why?
Because it is a sacred rule created by the parents. Disobeying them risks our entire empire to abandonment.
But you're the Emperor. If you want him kept alive, can't you just do that? I feel myself starting to panic a little. I'd thought that maybe Amicus would be kept in the dungeons for a while, but never that he could be at risk of being executed.
If it were only I that knew this, maybe. But there are others that know of his crime, and they expect me to terminate all evidence of the first contact.
Cassius stares at me, and I realize part of that evidence is, of course, me. Are you talking about Cato? He's just your advisor, right? You can ignore him. This time Cassius doesn't respond, looking away again.
If I can make the case that this was a truly honest mistake, then maybe I have a chance of convincing these others. Better yet, convince them that this wasn't first contact at all. Are you even sure your people are completely unaware of the Galaxius?
I start to say that I'm pretty sure, but he's looking at me in a strange way. Our governments are pretty secretive. They might know something.
So it's possible that a crime wasn't committed at all. Simply a misunderstanding. And knowing where you came from can help us determine that.
I'm a bit caught off guard by all of this. I guess I'd just expected Cassius to let Amicus rot in the dungeons while he enjoyed his emperorship. But I'm reminded of what Virginia had said earlier, that although they might stab each other in the back, they're still siblings. Didn't you once say that you don't care about the parents? Wouldn't it be part of your plan for them to abandon the Empire? Cassius sighs deeply.
I've said many things, but I found that once you become emperor, your perspective on things change.
Like, how much you need the parents? Cassius glares at me, so I just go on. How would they find out anyway? Amicus said something about monitors? Obviously, we can just talk about it out in the open without anything happening. I look around, as if expecting a monitor to poke its head out from behind one of the pillars.
I don't know, but what I do know is that the fewer who know, the better.
What even is a monitor? Cassius shrugs.
Again, I don't know. None have appeared in living memory. But that does not mean we should not be cautious. The risk is far too great.
I don't really understand this. I feel like if the parents are as powerful and all-knowing as these aliens make them out to be, then they probably already know I'm here. Before I can bring this up to Cassius, though.
So what are you? And where are you from?
I think. He's right that it wouldn't make sense for the wolves to go after Earth. It's technically the last thing that the Empire would want, especially with Cassius as Emperor, considering his isolationist views. But most importantly, it could help Amicus. I take a deep breath. And if I tell you, you'll let me see Amicus?
Yes.
I don't like only being able to go on his word, but for some reason, I feel like he's being sincere. I'm a human from the planet Earth.
Human. Earth.
Cassius mumbles the words, the lingua cutting off and allowing me to hear the wolf's accented voice, unfiltered. He pulls the floating drone at his side toward himself, tapping at the screen a few times, probably making notes. It feels incredibly wrong at that moment, like I've betrayed all humans somehow. But again, I can't see why it would put Earth in danger. On top of that, I'm also counting on Amicus becoming emperor eventually, and I know he'd never do anything to my planet. I'm playing the game. So, I can go see him now? He snaps his gaze up to mine.
Yes, now is best. Cato should not be back for a few more hours, but I can only give you 20 minutes, just to be safe.
Cato? What about him?
What do you mean, what about him?
I want to ask Cassius why it sounds like Cato is in charge, and not he himself, but I know not to press those buttons right now. Never mind. So, can I see him regularly? Cassius sighs loudly again, standing up.
If it's not often and you come to me first, and if Cato's away.
Yep, definitely not fully in charge. Cato's clearly got some control over Cassius. Either way, I'm too happy at the thought of being able to see Amicus semi-regularly to care at the moment.
Anyway, come, escort Marco to the dungeons to visit Amicus for 20 minutes.
That's when I remember I have other questions. Wait, do you have contact with the parents now? Cassius looks at me strangely.
Yes, we made contact after I became emperor. It was expected.
Oh, that's good.
Indeed. Though we had to implement the traditional technique, it's a bit archaic, but highly effective.
Oh, so do you have the stretch drive again? Cassius looks at me suspiciously. Hey, I need to get home eventually, and you'd be getting rid of the problem if you got me there.
Well, no, not yet. But I've only spoken with them a few times. I'll be meditating on that today. I'll keep you updated when we discuss things in the future.
You want to talk to me again?
Yes?
Cassius then stalks off, while a drone circles around me, telling me to follow it. I think about apologizing then for the whole Nervo incident, but then I realize if he's not going to mention it, then maybe I shouldn't either. I realize then how strange the whole exchange has been. Cassius had seemed like a whole different person, but I guess now he thinks of me more as an equal, at least in terms of intelligence. It makes him almost tolerable. I'm led to a part of the palace that I've never been before. We go through a small door into a small room that has a small pit in it. A ladder leads down into this pit, a pit that I can only imagine leads to the dungeons. The hole is dark, and as I pause, I can feel the drone hovering behind me.
Please proceed down the ladder, Marco.
I get a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, and I wonder for a moment if this is some sort of trap. I mean, of course it feels like a trap. I have a creepy AI nudging me toward a pit of darkness, all set up by Cassius. Despite the feeling, I force myself downward, shakily lowering myself to the ladder, several times, feeling as if I'm going to slip and fall. I have no idea how deep this thing goes, but as I start to think it might be a significant drop, my foot hits solid ground. To my surprise, I get exactly what I'd been expecting. It's what looks like, well, a straight-up dungeon. Dim yellow lighting is cast across the stone walls and floor, the air musty and stale, the halls quiet. The air is cold, and, fleetingly, I'm glad that Amicus has at least that. And as I'm thinking this, I hear movement up ahead. Shuffling footsteps and shadows being cast on the walls of the hallway in front of me. I take a few steps forward, but calm buzzes behind me.
Remain close to the ladder, please.
I stop and wait impatiently, wondering if what's up ahead is indeed Amicus. Again, I get that creepy feeling that I've been betrayed somehow, and what's up ahead is some sort of monster Cassius decided to feed me to. Instead, though, what turns the corner is Amicus. For a moment, my wolf stands there at the other end of the hall, staring at me. Then, before I know it, he's running at me. I start to move forward, but Calm tells me to stay put once again, more firmly this time. So I force myself to wait, watching as my wolf sprints at me. As he gets closer, I open my arms, and the next thing I know, I'm caught up in a mass of fur, warmth, and tears.
Marco!
I'm spun around in a circle, my face pressed hard against the wolf's neck before I'm set down again. Amicus doesn't let me go, though, clutching me tightly to his body. He sounded happy at first, but now I feel him gasp and shake. Amicus? I pull back as much as he'll let me, so I can see his face. I see then that he's crying, not even trying to hide it as he looks down at me with reddened eyes. He looks okay for the most part. His fur is a bit disheveled, and maybe he's a little thinner, but otherwise he looks healthy. The most noticeable change is actually his smell, a hint of musk without any scent of lavender. Amicus is looking at me just as closely, and one of his paws comes up to brush a thumb pad across my cheek. It's then that I realize that I'm crying too. So I press my face against his chest again, and we stay like that for a while. After about 10 minutes, our breathing is under control, and the wolf's grip on me loosens, though he doesn't let go. Finally, Amicus is the first to speak.
Marco, I am so sorry. What are you still doing here? You're a Chemian. You need to go to Neferu and tell him that you want to be taken home. Or at least to Chemia.
His voice breaks.
You need to get off of Adastra. It is not safe for you here. At the very least, have Virginia help smuggle you from the palace. You could.
I reach up a hand and press it against his muzzle, both to stop him from telling me to do things I won't be doing, and also because I feel like Calm is recording this, even if Cassius doesn't mean to monitor us. Amicus pauses in surprise as I clamp his muzzle shut. Then I see his eyes well up again as he reaches up to cup my hand and press his face into it, closing his eyes. I'm fine. I'm here to help you. I choose my words carefully. I'm going to help you, and I'm not leaving until I do.
Marco.
I'm not leaving.
Please.
This time, I bring my other hand up to touch his mouth. I'm safe. Neferu is keeping me very safe. Nothing can be done to me. I'm a Chemian now.
10 minutes remaining, Marco.
Already? Suddenly, I'm pressed up against the wolf's chest again as Amicus hugs me tightly.
I'm such a damn fool. I never think of others. I ruined your life. And for what?
No. I press back again. I know that I can leave with Neferu's help, but I'm choosing not to. Amicus opens his mouth to say more, but I cut in before he can.
I want to be here, and I'm going to.
I'm about to say, take down Cato, but I cut myself off.
Help you. Even Cassius wants to.
I'm gonna get you out of here, no matter what. More tears start to well up, so I just hug him, and we stay like that for a while. I wish I'd thought of things to say. I'm sure there are things I could have brought up that might have helped me, or Amicus. But my mind is blank, as all I want to do is hold my wolf.
Please, just don't involve yourself too much. Keep yourself safe. Being a Chemian doesn't guarantee all that if you meddle.
I can hear Amicus trying to choose his own words carefully.
Yeah, Cato's already shown me that.
Amicus jerks back, looking at me.
Did he do something to you?
Not me, Neferu.
What happened?
Neferu was kind of being forward, and he got kicked in the nuts.
What?
Yeah.
But he's the pharaoh's son.
Yeah, so I know that I need to be especially careful.
The look of shock on Amicus's face slowly changes to one of slight amusement.
Well, that's something I can't imagine.
It was definitely something. I'm glad to see Amicus smiling, at least a little.
1 minute.
I feel a flash of annoyance at the AI before Amicus is hugging me tightly again.
I'm going to be careful. I'm just going to help everyone figure out how to best clear your name.
I love you so much.
I love you too.
Time limit has been reached. Please proceed to the ladder, Marco. Please proceed to your cell, Amicus.
Amicus's embrace doesn't loosen, and instead, he lowers his head to kiss me. I kiss back.
Please untangle your limbs and oral cavities and proceed to your respective directives.
Amicus huffs in annoyance before drawing back.
And I'll be back. I just need to ask Cassius for the right times.
All right. There's much more I want to say to you. So please, return soon, if you possibly can.
Of course. As soon as I can.
Amicus gives me a small smile, and though I see tears in his eyes, they don't overflow this time. Welcome to the after reading. I'm gonna roll my thoughts for both episodes 16 and 17 into this one. So yeah, you all remember what I said in that recap, right? When Marco and Amicus got found out? The first half of episode 16 really made me want to shake Marco to get his memory working again. Who was the only other person besides Amicus who saw Marco the night that he came back to life? Who was the only person he'd told about his feelings for Amicus? Who was among the small group of people that knew about Cassius's plans for the triumvirates? Wake up and smell the fishy breath of the treacherous feline politician in the palace, Marco. To be fair, Marco did just recently die a very painful death, was somehow miraculously resurrected, and then was almost killed again. So the poor guy was obviously not going to be doing his most magnificent thinking under those circumstances. But kudos to him for piecing it together anyway. Unfortunately, Alex is shown to be very good at his job, and manages to throw Marco at least partially off of his scent. So let's walk through this real quick. Marco approached Alex with some solid accusations. I will acknowledge that Alexios may have genuinely felt like he was in danger. He did just get a militaristic dictator puppet put on the throne, Amicus thrown into the dungeons, and Marco nearly executed. But Marco was not being physically aggressive, as Alexios accuses. He was just asking some very pointed questions with very important implications. So what does Alex do? He gaslights. The cat purposefully runs into the baths to sell the illusion that he's panicked by Marco's aggression. This is doubly effective since he's already made a big fuss about how much he hates water. He then purposefully and dramatically injured himself and falls into the water, blames Marco for his injuries, and then makes himself look as weak and helpless as possible. Only then, after this new stage has been set, does Alex offer some rather flimsy alternative explanations to Marco's accusations. Now, Marco isn't dumb, but this is a level of mental and emotional manipulation he was not prepared for. So, even though Alexios did admit that he did indeed tell Neferu about Marco's intelligence, to which he shifts the blame to Neferu for being too persuasive, Marco can't help but second-guess himself. That is some great stuff right there. Cassius also does something interesting in these chapters, which was mentioned in the intro. Specifically, he deliberately disobeyed Cato by not setting his Nervo to lethal. For someone who just watched his physically capable brother get his ass handed to him by the old wolf, it would take some fortitude of character to intentionally not do as he's told. Sure, it's not much in the grand scheme of things, and could easily be passed off as an honest mistake, and it by no means redeems his character. But it was enough to reward him with not death when Marco turned it against him. So there's that. This also got me thinking. Despite all the vitriol we heard Cassius spew during the trial of rhetoric, actions speak louder than words. This may be our first hint that Cassius might not actually believe everything he's been preaching. And maybe, just maybe, now that we know Cassius is a mere puppet sitting on the throne, most of those ideas might actually be Cato's. After all, during his speech, the only time we saw Cassius speak passionately, but not with rage, was when he was talking about wanting to help those who were like him out there, which hints to me that that was likely the only part of the speech that was not purely performative. And it's actually at odds with the message in the rest of his speech. Isolationist and totalitarian messaging, and social institutions that help take care of minorities like people with genetic conditions and disabilities, don't mix well. We continue to see this other side of Cassius in the throne room, where he indirectly admits that Cato is really the one in charge. Here, Cassius is openly concerned for the well-being of his brother, which we've never seen from him before. He tells Marco that the penalty for breaking the rules of first contact is death, and so nudges Marco to admit that there's no way for him to know for sure that Earth's governments are all unaware of the Galaxius. So that, along with the partial records in the archives, should be enough to clear Amicus's name of the charges, even if the human race is currently listed as unprofiled. But Cassius doesn't stop there. He then gives Marco access to Amicus, so long as Cato is absent and he asks permission first. Sure, he could be using this as an opportunity to spy on them, as Marco fears, but we don't really have any evidence of that. Even Marco comments how Cassius had seemed like a whole different person, which makes sense. Cassius was being groomed by a psychopath who also just so happened to be his late father's chief advisor. He knew this guy since he was a little kid. He had every reason to trust Cato's guidance, at least at first. And now it seems the wool is finally being pulled away from Cassius's eyes. Lastly, we've got to talk about Neferu and Virginia. I really enjoyed their conversations with Marco. The way Marco puts his foot down and demands to be taken seriously is very satisfying. He may be an outsider in all of this, but due to his unique situation, he's right in the middle of it all, just as much as they are. And it was doubly satisfying when Neferu outright admits this. I once again found myself really enjoying Neferu's character. It's a shame jackals aren't a type of fox, because that entire sequence where Neferu intentionally antagonizes Cato is the textbook definition of crazy like a fox. With some liquid courage, he risks his own safety to poke the bear, or wolf in this case, and manages to capture some decent blackmail footage of the former acting emperor. That's Neferu. As far as Virginia goes, we see Virginia getting shit done. She's the one who arranges the meeting between Marco and Cassius that allowed Marco to reunite with Amicus. And while we know she has her own motives and agendas, she's also very clear about how she feels about Amicus. She's like the not slimy version of Alexios, and I love her for that. It's just a shame that we get so little of her in this story. Now, before I close this thing out, here's a fun fact about jackals and foxes. When looking at the canid phylogenetic tree, jackals are part of the wolf-like clade, whereas foxes have two clades all of their own. And they last seem to have shared a common ancestor about 10 million years ago. And I thought that was neat. So now, what lies in store for our boys after all of these developments? Find out in the next episode of Adastra. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a like, share it with fellow degenerates, and leave a comment for the almighty YouTube algorithm. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Anthropos Yi.